Ang isa pang kategorya na pwedeng pagbatayan ninyo sa pagpili ay yung haba nung dula na sinusulat ninyo. Whether one act ba ito, short play lang ba ito, o isang full length, no? 5 acts. 5 acts is the longest I think there is. Or cycles of plays, no? Na mahaba talaga. No? Depende kasi yan doon sa kalakhan at kalawakan ng ideyang gusto nyong i-develop. The one-act play in its strictest form ay na-develop na yan nung panahon ng Enlightenment sa Europa kung saan nag-unify, no, ang time, space at saka action. Ibig sabihin, pagbukas ng dula, parang nahuli natin sa akto yung mga tauhan na dumadrama hanggang sa katapusan. So, kumbaga, ang ilusyon nito, nangyari ito sa loob ng 45 minutos or isang oras. At yung action, huling-huli natin. Walang pagbabago ng panahon, walang pagbabago ng setting. Yun na yun. Kaya yun yung tinawag na one act of play. Ganon yung mga 5-act plays or 3-act plays ni Chekhov. No? Hindi nagbabago yung eksena sa unang yugto. Magbabago yung setting, etc. Lalabas yung ikalawang yugto, isang eksena din lang siya. Okay? Napaka-conducive nun kung realistic yung pinapalabas. Kasi nga, ang ilusyon na ginagawa ng realismo ay, yun nga, binubuksan mo yung tinatawag nating fourth wall. At pag upo natin doon, bumukas yung wall na yon at nakita natin sila. At kung ano yung nakita natin mula sa simula hanggang sa huli, yun. Hindi siya realidad, makatotohanan siya. Nag-develop na rin yan. Nagkaroon yan ng iba't ibang mga sanga. Nagkaroon na ng magic realism, may hyper-realism pa, no? Na isinasama pa kayo mismo doon sa environment. It's as if hindi lang kayo audience kung hindi participants sa nangyayari. Most of the time, nag-create ito ng confusion sa writer at saka maski sa audience when they say it's realistic. They confuse it with reality. Reality and realism are completely two different things. Di ba? Reality doesn't have the same order that a realistic work would have. No? Kasi when you say realistic, you're really just saying parang. So you're creating the illusion na ito ay totoo. At madalas, parang yung lalong-lalo na kapag based on real-life event, ayan, yung mga ganong paggamit ng mga salita, no? Based on a real-life event, ang tendency ng beginning writer, ilalagay niya talaga yung pati yung clutter, yung disorganized condition, yung irrelevant aspects ng nangyayari sa buhay na yon doon sa work. So, ang nangyayari minsan kumakalat yung buong point nung work, no? Or hindi mo na magets kung ano talaga yung point. Parang gano'n. So, yun yung clash na nakikita ko na maaari ninyong ma-encounter bilang manunulat. No? Kasi pili din, pag gumagawa ka ng isang realistic form, pinipili mo rin kung anong ilalagay mo doon. Ngayon, yung haba, kung one act yan at full length, depende yan sa kung papaano ninyo ilalahad yung gusto ninyong sabihin sa kwentong ito. Meron talagang mga kwento na sadyang mahaba. At meron namang mga kwento na sadyang maikli. Pero bukod doon, depende pa rin ito sa gusto ninyong sabihin. It will really just depend on gaano kalawak at kahaba yung ikikwento ninyo. Dahil sa paghaba ng kwento, mas dumadami yung gusto ninyong sabihin. So, maaring ito nagsimula sa halimbawa, no? Nagsimula sa pagtatayo ng isang organisasyon or kumpanya. Tapos noon, ano-ano ang dinaanan nito. So, maaring nabuwag, merong nabuo uli, etc. No? Parang, kumbaga, ang isang turn of event, nagki-create ng panibagong problema. So, lumalalim yung problema hanggang sa lalong mong napapatunayan yung lakas at husay ng mga tauhan para itaguyod at ipagtagumpay kung ano man yung pinaglalaban nila. Pero kung kaya sa isang iglap, nakuhuli mo na doon, yun ang one-act play. Kasi yun lang ang gusto mo o yun lang ang masasabi mo. Kaya tapos na. Parang gano'n. There are cycles of plays also. No? Merong mga, yung tinatawag nilang play cycle. Ibig sabihin, 5 plays in one. Parang kumaga, hindi mo makukompleto yung buong experience kung hindi mo panood yung 5 yon. Para ring nobela na in 4 parts, mga ganun. Or saga, The Rosales Saga, are 5 completely different novels, but, taken as one, makita mo yung buong landscape ng Rosales, Pangasinan. Parang ganun. So, yun. So, plays can go on and on and on, depending on how much all these ideas still related to each other will connect in the end. But they can also be one spurt of an idea and still be as impactful. So, I'm not giving any, parang, hindi ako nag-prefer kung one act or full length. No? It depends. Ang ano lang natin dyan, ano yung idea? Kasi most of the one-act ideas, minsan, napakasimple lang. Na parang it doesn't even merit or deserve being written as a play. Baka it's better written as an article or as a personal essay, no, or a shout-out, a Twitter, parang ganon. Ayun, a status quo. Rather than a play that needs actors, directors, stage, sets, etc. Tapos nila naman kung napapakita mo. Nakita ko na yan doon sa viral ng Jollibee. Parang ganon. O mas mahal yun, viral siya. Parang ganon. So, ang punto pa rin is, ano yung gusto mong sabihin? But of course, as writers, I would also encourage you to write full-length plays. Kasi, I'm not saying that all full-length plays are much deeper than one act. Not necessarily, no? They can go on and on and on and still be fluff. But, I think it's a good exercise for you to develop your ideas on a grander scale, etc.
Pwede rin yung nag-start siya as one act. Tapos, nagawa na siya, tapos na siya. And then, may expand mo pa. Using that one act as just the first act to a full length.
Pwede. But that's no guarantee. No? Ang nangyari dyan, yung kung paano ako naging leading lady, was a one-act play. And it became a full-blown musical. So, may mga ganon. Para rin may mga one-act plays na ginawang pelikula. So, nag-achieve na siya ng full-length status. Relatively, di ba? Like for example, yung Invisible, it was a one-act play. Pero when it was translated into film, it became a presentation of a milieu. Parang ganon. So, pwede.
Pero expanding on that same topic lang din.
Oo. But again, like I said, it's no guarantee that it will be successful, aesthetically, etc.
Tutulungan niyo po ba kami? Paano mag-develop ng full length? I mean, may mga, share ba kayo, kahit hindi ngayon, mga exercises or strategies how to develop or expand, or it really starts with what you want to say and it has to be something that is grand and
It's not just the grandness, no? Kung hindi, it's also an exercise and skill of developing ideas. Kasi yung one act, gaya nga sabi ko, parang isa lang yung sinundan mo, which is quite, it's still an effort to do. Lalo-lalo na kung medyo sensitive or very delikado yung topic na inaano mo, na tinatalakay mo, etc. Pero parang kumbaga, that's all I have to say about this. Parang ganun yung mangyayari dun sa... I guess it's the same example as will you write a short story or will you write a novel? The effort will be much more daunting. The project will be much more daunting kung novel na siya. Kasi, mas marami na siyang related ideas na pwede mong ipasok. No? Posible ka nang maglagay ng subplots, posible ka nang maglagay ng parallel plots, etc. To elaborate more on the ideas. It could be the same idea as your first one-act play. It only means that in developing a full length, you're developing the idea much more, making it more, subjecting it to more complex contexts. Diba? Para mas maging... Isa sa mga tendencies ng iba, lalo na kung natanay sa one act, ay gumawa ng full length, pero actually, ang nagagawa nila ay 3 one act. Kasi nagiging trilogy of characters, no? Parang gano'n, di ba? So, para, comparing 3 lives, but actually, there are 3 one-act plays. Pwedeng gano'n, no? Pero pwede rin namang talagang sinundan mo lahat. No. So, I guess, since many of the writers are joining Virgin Love Fest, doon lang nagkakaroon ng venue, mas magandang exercise kung i-push ng mga writers na ito, na katulad nyo, na sumasali kayo, to develop the ideas, etc.
Actually, either minsan nalagyan mo na ng before and after. Yung mga gano'n na parang minsan kaya nga exciting yung one act before kasi nandun siya in the middle.
Oo, kasi may mawawala.
Oo eh.
Doon sa, kumbaga, inespresso mo, tapos doon, ang dinagdag mo lang pala, tubig. So, parang...
Nawala yung effect, yung shot, nawala yung espresso,
Correct.
yung caffeine dun sa
Oo.
na lumalabas minsan kapag pinu-full length.
Ganon. That's true. The easier way is to think of it as a telenovela. Di ba? Yung mga pelikula, ginawang telenovela. Di ba? The way they expand it, nilagyan lang talaga nila ng tubig. So, lumabnaw yung story. Hindi, dumami, humaba. Oo. Pero, hindi yun ang gusto nating mangyari. Hindi lang natin gustong pahabain. Di ba? Gusto lang nating palalimin. Di ba?